Whenever I listen back to something that I do, it just makes me feel weird.
Hi, my lovely.
Hi.
Welcome to America's Got Talent.
What really happened to Courtney after America's Got Talent shocked the world. The shy teenager who transformed into a rock and roll hurricane on stage vanished from the spotlight just as fast as she rose to fame. But years later, in 2025, her comeback story has left everyone speechless. This isn't just a tale of talent, it's a journey through fame, silence, heartbreak, and rebirth. What turned that nervous girl from County Durham into one of the most fearless young voices in modern rock. The truth behind Courtney's life after Britain's Got Talent will absolutely stun you. The rebirth of a. When the name Courtney first echoed through the halls of talent television in 2018, few could have predicted the storm of raw energy and emotion that would define her. A shy teenage girl from a small town in County Durham, England, stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage trembling with nerves. Yet the moment the music kicked in and she began belting out Reading, hard to handle, the crowd was on its feet, jaws dropped, and even the judges struggled to comprehend the transformation before them. Hit the golden buzzer, propelling Courtney straight to the live shows and into instant viral fame. Millions of viewers replayed that performance, calling her the reincarnation of Joplin or a young Tina Turner reborn in the modern age. But behind the electric growl and magnetic stage presence lay a quiet, awkward teenager still learning who she was and what her sudden fame meant. The world adored her rock and roll soul, yet few paused to wonder how a 14-year-old could shoulder that pressure. Fast forward to 2025, and the once timid girl has evolved into an artist with scars, growth, and a story that shocks even her earliest fans. The transformation of Courtney is not merely a tale of talent, it's one of survival, self-discovery, and reclaiming control over a destiny the internet once tried to write for her. The aftermath of instant fame. After the glitter faded and the TV cameras turned off, Courtney found herself in a strange new reality, one that was far louder than the applause she had left behind. The instant fame that came with her America's Got Talent run was both a blessing and a burden. She was suddenly a household name, her raspy voice and explosive stage presence replayed across continents. But behind the screen, she was just a teenager trying to finish school. Fans expected the next Joplin, labels wanted the next viral sensation, yet Courtney was neither. The transition from viral fame to sustainable artistry was brutal. She struggled to fit into an industry that didn't know what to do with her. At only 15, she had already experienced the whiplash of global attention followed by the cold silence of the industry's short memory. Interviews slowed down, public appearances grew scarce, and Courtney began to vanish from headlines. Many assumed she had quit music, burned out, or disappeared entirely. But the truth was far more complex. She was quietly redefining herself away from the spotlight. It was too much, too fast, she later said in an interview, reflecting on those early years of confusion. She stopped performing for months, battling self-doubt and identity struggles, unsure whether she belonged in the rock scene that once worshipped her. It was the first of many disappearances, a cycle that would later become part of her mystique. But even as the world stopped watching, Courtney never stopped creating. In private studios and bedroom corners, she began writing again, not for fame, but for freedom. The silent years and quiet reinvention. In the years following her viral explosion, Courtney entered what fans came to call her silent era. While the public wondered whether she had retired or simply disappeared, she was in truth rebuilding herself piece by piece. The young artist had the image the media had cast upon her, a wild, barefoot rock prodigy who seemed untamable, and began searching for her own voice beneath all that noise. Living away from the spotlight in her native England, Courtney started writing songs that reflected her inner battles rather than the expectations that had haunted her. She taught herself how to produce and record basic demos, experimenting with genres from grunge and soul to dark pop. For the first time, there were no judges, no camera lights, and no need to prove herself. During those quiet years, she realized that her power wasn't just in her voice, it was in her words. While some speculated she'd lost her spark, those close to her described a teenager evolving into an artist, someone painfully aware of fame's cost yet unwilling to abandon her gift. "I had to disappear to find myself," she said later, "otherwise I'd just become someone else's idea of who I should be." It was a rare moment of introspection from someone still in her teens, but it perfectly summarized what she was going through. As the world scrolled past her, forgetting the girl who had once set YouTube on fire, Courtney was quietly preparing for something deeper, a sound that reflected her truth rather than her reputation. This period of reinvention would later become the emotional foundation of her comeback, one that would surprise even the harshest critics who thought her story was over. Rising from the shadows with her own sound. By the time 2023 arrived, Courtney had transformed from a teenage sensation into a young woman ready to reclaim her identity as a true artist. Gone was the wide-eyed girl who once trembled under stage lights. In her place stood a songwriter who had tasted both fame and silence and now sought something more honest than applause. Her first notable comeback came with the haunting single Breakable, a track that hinted at vulnerability rather than rebellion. It wasn't the roaring blues rock anthem fans expected. It was introspective, raw, and unapologetically personal. Listeners could feel the ache in her voice, the kind that can only come from someone who's lived through the chaos of being misunderstood. Not long after, she followed it up with That Girl Don't Live Here, a title that felt like both a declaration and a warning. The girl who once smiled nervously before transforming into a stage storm was gone. In her place was an artist who had learned that growth often means outgrowing the expectations of others. These releases marked a turning point for Courtney. Instead of chasing viral fame, she was crafting music on her own terms, experimenting with sounds that fused rock, blues, and indie grit. Each lyric seemed to peel back another layer of her journey, exposing the loneliness behind the glitter of. Critics began to take notice again, not because of nostalgia for her AGT days, but because her artistry had matured into something authentic. It was as if she was saying, "You thought you knew me, but you only saw a fraction of who I really am." That artistic rebirth, quietly executed and fiercely independent, proved that Courtney wasn't a one-hit wonder from a talent show. She was a survivor redefining what it meant to be an artist in an era obsessed with instant fame. Monsters, Madness, and a triumphant return to rock. When Monsters dropped in late 2023, it was more than just a single, it was a manifesto. Courtney, now 19, was no longer singing to please anyone. She was confronting her own demons head-on. The song exploded with grit, rebellion, and emotional turbulence, a perfect encapsulation of the battles she had been fighting in silence. From the opening guitar riff to the growl in her vocals, Monsters was an unapologetic scream from someone who had been underestimated for far too long. "We all have monsters inside," she said in a brief interview. "Mine just like to sing." That quote spread quickly among fans, many of whom saw the song as her reclaiming power after years of being defined by others. The track debuted on Billboard's Hard Rock Digital Song Sales chart at number 19, making her one of the youngest independent female artists to break into that category. More than just a musical victory, it was symbolic, a public declaration that she had survived fame's darkness and turned it into art. The accompanying music video further cemented her new identity: edgy, cinematic, and unapologetically weird. Gone were the pretty pop visuals. Instead, the video featured dim lighting, surreal imagery, and Courtney's intense expressions that bordered between agony and ecstasy. For the first time in years, the world wasn't just watching her, they were listening. Fans flooded her socials with messages like "She's back," and "This is the real Courtney." What made it more powerful was that she had done it without a major label, management machine, or PR spectacle. It was pure, self-made authenticity, echoing the same raw magic that first captivated audiences years earlier, but this time she was in control. Spellbound in the spirit of Rebirth. By 2024, Courtney had fully stepped into a new era, an artist no longer haunted by the ghost of her teenage fame but empowered by it. Her next releases, Spellbound and You Only Love Me When I Lie, revealed a woman who had learned to channel pain into performance with haunting precision. Spellbound in particular felt like a cinematic rebirth. The visuals painted her as both the witch and the wounded, a creator and a curse wrapped into one mesmerizing persona. Her raspy, feral voice, now more controlled and soulful, danced between desperation and defiance. It wasn't the Courtney of 2018, it was someone reborn from the ashes of that viral explosion. The lyrics of You Only Love Me When I Lie struck an even deeper nerve, peeling back layers of emotional exhaustion from years of expectation and heartbreak. Critics began comparing her evolution to artists like Amy and Florence, women who had mastered the balance between vulnerability and power. What made Courtney's story extraordinary, however, was that she was crafting all this without the backing of a corporate machine. She wrote, conceptualized, and helped direct much of her visual storytelling, ensuring every release reflected her truth rather than a marketing narrative. Live performances followed, small venues, intimate crowds, and raw energy that reignited the same electricity that once lit up the AGT stage, but with maturity that could only come from years of struggle. Her show at the New York Pops Gala in April 2024, hosted by Clive Davis, stunned the audience. She wasn't a nostalgia act, she was an artist in full bloom. The same girl once labeled awkward and shy had learned how to command a stage with both fire and finesse. Each performance felt like a confession, each song a chapter of redemption. Courtney wasn't chasing fame anymore, she was chasing honesty, and it made her more magnetic than ever. The making of Little Miss Jagged. In 2025, Courtney began unveiling her most ambitious project yet, her debut full-length album titled Little Miss Jagged. The title alone felt autobiographical, a poetic reflection of her journey through fame's fractures and personal growth. Recorded between London and New York, the album became a sonic diary that merged her blues rock roots with modern grunge and alternative edge. Courtney described it as the sound of chaos learning how to sing. It wasn't an overproduced pop record designed for radio. It was raw, imperfect, and entirely her. Working with a small circle of trusted collaborators instead of a massive label, she ensured that every lyric and chord carried her fingerprint. The sessions reportedly stretched late into the night, where she'd experiment with analog sounds, vintage amps, and scratch takes to preserve the soul of each track. In interviews, she revealed that songs like DNA, Electric Shines, and Die and Stay pretty captured different facets of her personality, rage, resilience, and rebellion. Every time I thought I had to sound perfect, she confessed, I remembered how imperfect things made me real. The album artwork, teased in early 2025, showed her standing against a cracked mirror, her reflection distorted, a perfect metaphor for how fame had once fractured her identity but now reflected her truth. Music insiders who attended early listening sessions described Little Miss Jagged as a fearless mix of rock, soul, and confession. What made the project even more remarkable was that it wasn't born in a corporate boardroom. It was crafted in solitude, fueled by grit and self-belief. Courtney wasn't trying to prove she could be a pop star. She was showing the world she had never stopped being an artist. Little Miss Jagged was not just an album. It was a statement that the girl once discovered by a talent show had now discovered herself. The dark side of stardom in her silent battle. Behind Courtney's explosive comeback and defiant stage persona lay a far darker story, one that very few fans ever saw. As her star power rose, so did the mental and emotional toll of the life she never fully asked for. Between 2019 and 2022, Courtney vanished from the public eye for nearly 2 years, and speculation ran wild. Some claimed she had lost her voice, others whispered of burnout or record label disputes. But according to close sources and fragments from her later interviews, the truth was much more human. She was battling the crushing pressure of being a teenage prodigy in an adult industry. Fame had brought her admiration, but it had also caged her in expectations too heavy for her age. In those years, Courtney struggled with self-worth, isolation, and identity. She reportedly described her anxiety as like 1,000 cameras still flashing when no one's actually there. Online criticism, comparisons, and constant scrutiny from strangers who felt entitled to her life pushed her into withdrawal. One particularly disturbing rumor suggested she once confessed to wanting to silence her own voice after feeling cursed by the same gift that made her famous. Whether literal or symbolic, the message was clear: fame had nearly broken her. But like many great artists before her, Courtney used her pain as creative fuel. Songs like Monsters and Breakable weren't just lyrics, they were therapy. In a later interview, she said softly, "Everyone sees the performance, but no one sees what it costs." It was the kind of honesty rarely heard from a former child star, an acknowledgement that surviving the industry is a bigger achievement than winning any show. When she finally emerged again, it wasn't with the fragile sparkle of a former prodigy. It was with the fierce, self-forged steel of someone who had looked into the abyss and learned how to sing back. Independence, reinvention, and a new beginning. By early 2025, Courtney had fully stepped into a new phase of her life, one not defined by reality television or fleeting fame, but by independence and creative reinvention. After briefly signing with Amentos, she decided to part ways, realizing that traditional management structures often prioritize profit over artistry. It was a bold move for someone still in her early 20s, but boldness had always been part of her DNA. Soon after, she joined Total Artist Management under Oliver, a partnership that allowed her to retain full control of her music, image, and direction. The difference was immediate. Gone were the carefully scripted appearances and commercialized collaborations. Courtney's new era felt organic, raw, and deliberately imperfect. Her social media presence shifted from glossy promotion to authentic connection. Clips of her writing late at night, laughing in rehearsal rooms, or performing stripped-down sets in dimly lit venues. Fans noticed the change in around her, praising her for staying true to herself in a world obsessed with image. What surprised many was how quickly the industry started to respect her again, not as a novelty from a talent show, but as a legitimate recording artist. She was invited to small festivals, niche rock showcases, and indie platforms that celebrated artistic honesty over mainstream polish. Critics described her as the voice of her generation, a phrase she reportedly laughed at, saying, "I'm just trying to make sense of it all, one song at a time." Yet beneath her humility was quiet confidence, the kind that comes from surviving storms and walking out stronger. Her journey had come full circle, from being discovered by the world to rediscovering herself in front of it. With Little Miss Jagged on the horizon, Courtney wasn't chasing fame anymore. She was chasing purpose, and that perhaps was the most revolutionary act of all in an industry built on illusions. Legacy, reflection, and the echo of a new era. As 2025 unfolds, Courtney stands not just as a musician, but as a symbol of resilience in an era where fame often devours the young. She's no longer the trembling teen who stunned the America's Got Talent audience years ago, nor merely the viral clip replayed across YouTube. She has evolved into something far more enduring, a storyteller who turned survival into art. Her upcoming album, Little Miss Jagged, represents not only a creative milestone, but also a statement of independence, declaring that the music industry no longer owns her narrative. In interviews, she speaks with a grounded wisdom that feels older than her years, often crediting her struggles for giving her authenticity. "I think I had to lose everything people thought I was before I could become who I really am," she once said, a line that has since resonated deeply with her fans. Across social media, a new generation of aspiring singers now cites Courtney as proof that real artistry can outlive viral fame. Her followers aren't just watching her, they're growing with her. In an age where so many young talents burn out before their first album, Courtney's journey feels like a quiet revolution, a reminder that disappearing isn't failure, it's transformation. The once frightened girl from County Durham has grown into a woman who wields her voice like both a weapon and a healing tool, channeling the jagged edges of her past into melodies that cut deep. As anticipation builds for her 2025 tour and the release of Little Miss Jagged, one thing is clear. Courtney's story isn't a comeback, it's a continuation. Her voice, once dismissed as too wild for the mainstream, has become the anthem of those who refuse to conform. She has turned her chaos into harmony, her pain into poetry, and her silence into strength. And somewhere between the lights of yesterday and the freedom of today, Courtney finally found the one thing fame could never give her, herself.